Good time of the day, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the 100th webinar in the GIF Education and Training webinar series titled Advanced Manufacturing, Supporting Generation 4 Reactor Systems. I'll quickly go through some housekeeping slides. So first, use the listen through your computer function to have the best possible experience. If you have any technical difficulties, please look into the Zoom online support. Most importantly, if you have a question during the webinar, please ask it using the Q&A pane that I will show in one slide how to find it. So the questions can be asked during all the webinar, and the moderator and the panelists will take the questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording as well as the presentation of this webinar will be made available in the days following the webinar on the GIF public website, www.gen4.org. And a brief online survey will follow the webinar. Please take the time to answer those questions to help us improve our webinar series. So the Q&A pane is at the bottom of your screen. You can see a little Q&A sign, and if you click on it, a pop-up will come out where you can type your question at the bottom, and by clicking on the send blue button, this will show your question to the moderator and the panelist. Again, please do ask your questions as they come during the webinar, and we will take them at the end of the webinar. So I would 100 webinars is a real milestone, and I would like, on behalf of the GIF Technical Secretariat, to take a moment to recognize the journey that brought us here, and take this opportunity to say that, to remind that the GIF education and training effort started as a task force in 2015, and then it became a working group in 2019, as we know it today. Since 2016, 100 webinars were streamed almost once a month, with more than 9,000 live viewers from more than 80 countries, and at least as many viewers of the recordings that are made available on the GIF public website, on our YouTube channel, and on our Bilibili channel. These efforts of knowledge and expertise sharing were made possible by the person who led this webinar initiative, organized each of them, and moderated all the webinars, Dr. Patricia Pavier from PNNL in the USA, the continuous support of the Education, Training and Working Group leadership and members to this initiative, and of course, the presenters that kindly accepted to dedicate some of their precious time to share their knowledge and expertise with a growing audience of people interested in the progress, challenges, policy, strategy, and technology details related to making the next generation of nuclear energy systems a reality. I wish us many more hundreds of interesting webinars that will be part of the common knowledge base of the GIF community. And now I would like to formally introduce our moderator for today's session. Dr. Patricia Pavier is the National Technical Director of the Molten Salt Reactor Program for the US Department of Energy, Office of Nuclear Energy. She's been an active member of the GIF Education and Training Working Group since its inception, and she was actually the first chair of this GIF group, and she's now the webinar lead for the Education and Training Working Group. As I said, she's been instrumental in establishing the present series of webinars, and she keeps it flourishing with the energy and enthusiasm she puts in it. She will facilitate this webinar and the follow-up Q&A session, and I will now let her introduce today's speaker. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexei. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. 100 webinar. Oh my gosh, that's the big milestone. And it's a real pleasure to celebrate this milestone when my friend, Dr. Isabella van Rooyen, who is a senior technical advisor for Advanced Materials System at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in the United States, following 10.5 years at Idaho National Laboratory as a distinguished staff scientist. Dr. van Rooyen supports the Department of Energy, Office of Nuclear Energy, as a US representative and co-chair on the International Advanced Manufacturing and Materials Engineering Working Group for Gen 4 reactors. Advanced Material and Manufacturing Technical Areas Lead for the Advanced Material and Manufacturing Technologies Program, and previously as National Technical Director for the Advanced Methods for Manufacturing program. Experience spans nuclear, aerospace, automotive industries for high temperature materials development, and advanced manufacturing techniques such as laser material processing, casting processes, powder metallurgy, and additive manufacturing processes. Dr. Van Wooyen has more than 60 journal publications, 40 conference contributions, 7 granted patents, and she holds a PhD in physics, a master in metallurgy, and an MBA. So again, Isabella, thank you very much to be with us today. I sincerely appreciate that you are willing to present these important topics to support advanced reactor technology systems. Without further ado, I give you the floor. And thank you everyone for being with us today. And thank you very much, Alexei, for all the support.
Thank you very much, Patricia and Alexei. And obviously, I'm so excited to share with you my passion on advanced manufacturing technologies, because I know we can all make a big difference in the deployment of Generation 4 reactors. Now, the overview, obviously the topic is extremely large, and I'm going to provide you some focused areas with information on. Obviously, I cannot share in this time allow all the technical detail of all the manufacturing processes, but I hope at the end of this conversation and discussion that you will have a better idea of your interest and then reach out for further discussions on this. With that, then, I'm going to provide overview of the AMME working group. I'm going to use a lot of acronyms, my apologies, but hopefully when you look again at the slides, you will understand where it comes from. I am going to provide Framatone's application perspective, because they are providing a very good overview of additive manufacturing per se, joining and welding techniques, large-scale manufacturing, profile forming processes, cold spray, and then new techniques or applications, and then non-destructive examination. With this, we cannot talk about advanced manufacturing if we don't address the supply chain challenges, but also see the opportunities with that. And then the ASME code acceptance will be briefly addressed, and then provide a summary of the US AMMT program with some final remarks. With this, I wanted to start up front with all the acknowledgements, and I am sure I have left out so many other people because it is a very big topic and very big contributions I have received from all these researchers and other researchers in the teams that I've listed here. And thank you very much for the AMMT program that is sponsoring my contribution to this presentation, as well as the AMME International Working Group. With that, then, there are many definitions for advanced manufacturing. However, it is really the use of innovative technologies to improve and optimize all the aspects of the manufacturing process through the whole life cycle, from conception to end of life, with a goal then to enhance efficiency, productivity, and competitiveness. It also involves the modification, or how advanced technologies like robotics, automation, and data analytics are being integrated in traditional manufacturing processes. So we should not only focus on the newer technologies, we must really look at the full envelope of manufacturing processes so that we can bring all the newer technologies to there. Now, the US regulator is currently evaluating 5 advanced manufacturing techniques, and they classify it in mature, and you will see I put it in inverted commas there, because there is still a lot of research and development, or at least for deployment activities that is necessary from us as a community. And powder metallurgy, hot isostatic pressing, PM heap, electron beam welding, and cold spray is so-called mature technologies. But the really new technologies are the additive manufacturing processes, which include laser powder bed fusion and direct energy deposition. Now, the Nuclear Energy Institute identifies 16 advanced manufacturing methods that are most of interest to the nuclear power plants. I did not list it here, but after my presentation, I think you can realize that it is really dependent on the customer need, at your need, that we all can contribute towards that. And with this, then, let me start and talk about our collaborative activities on the global level. I have included here on the slide set also the publicly accessible website for the Advanced Manufacturing and Materials Engineering Working Group, and I really invite you to go and work on there. A little bit history of us. We've started in 2018 as a task force, and then we are very happy to say that we've converted to a working group in October 2023. And today I'm going to give you a snapshot about what we are doing over there. I'm not going to read through this long list of our members. However, it is very important for our global community to understand that we have a country, 17 country representatives, and each one of you can reach out to your country representative to understand how you can become involved and how you can contribute. Because our main overarching objective is to reduce the time to deployment for advanced manufacturing and materials engineering technology. And specifically, we aim to promote international collaboration on the qualification of these processes, because together we can be quicker and faster and better. And that is what we are aiming to do here. We are frequently meeting, and also we are happy to say, in addition to the country representatives, we are open to observers from industry, and we are extremely happy to say, as you can see there on the slide, that we do have some industry observers that is nearly every month in our discussions and our meetings available, and even ad hoc conversations in between those meetings. Very excited about the activity and the action of our teams. Now, how do we do our work here? It is not funded projects in the sense that we are providing funding, but each country are contributing knowledge base, working together to the higher value added. With that, then, we have divided into 4 task groups, and we have 3 co-chairs, myself, Mark Messner, and Lyndon Edwards. And all 4 of the tasks have specific goals, and shortly we will go through that now. With task 1 is the industry survey, because we are here to serve the industry, to help the industry and to do priority work, what is important for them. Very important that we have noticed, we have done already through the task force time and the working group time, 3 surveys. And the industry behavior really changed in, I think, 6 years, from reactive to proactive. And this is what this slide are showing us here. So, and specifically the last recent increase in regulatory engagement, which is important to include the regulatory from early stages, so as well as actually the supply chain development as well from early stages. You can see there in the top right-hand corner that the number of the respondents to our survey really is quite significant. It's 40 respondents during that time, with a higher peak during the COVID period. But very excited to see that industry are joining hands with all of us and understand or experience the urgency, and therefore we need to go further. So what are the materials that they are interested? Steels are still, or iron-based are still the highest interest, and they are focusing more on the traditional engineering materials for a variety of reasons, because more information are available, more more material, more supply chain is available, and therefore the risks are perceived to be lower. However, the interest in ceramics seems to be increasing relative to metals, but metals are still by far the most interesting topic. I also included here the breakdown of the type of properties, especially for advanced manufactured materials or processes above the conventional materials, because of the lack of data, the lack of properties for the variety of advanced manufacturing processes, and specifically the creep and creep fatigue and irradiated properties, because it obviously affects the toughness and your corrosion, etc. Also, we have seen a slight change in the components that the industry partners are interested in, and more the reactor internals become of higher interest here. The interest in cladding decreased, but it may be an artifact because the community is starting to understand that this specific working group of us are not focusing on the fuel meat itself, on the actinide type of manufacturing. So it may be an artifact, but we don't have enough data to do that. So I think it is not at this moment a real big surprise. However, we also see a big change if we look at the manufacturing techniques that the industry stakeholders are interested. You can look at the blue on the slide, the blue bars here, and I've highlighted it also, the three biggest changes with the yellow block. And that shows that the direct energy deposition processes have received a drastic increase of interest, the PM HIP as well, and then advanced welding from day one, or let's say when we started with this surveys, was the highest of interest, and that all shows the possible trend to large-scale manufacturing and integration of systems. So really, industry wants now to construct, fabricate, build the systems. It is not only anymore on component or on material level. So showing that it is really an earnest for us to look at the full life cycle of that material. A little bit on the direct energy deposition processes. It both include the wire-fed DED as well as powder-fed DED, because each one of them have a specific niche of components that we can do. Now, let us talk a little bit further on how the information that we have received from this task 1, the industry surveys, are feeding into task 2, 3, and 4. So task 2's main objective is the sharing, the coordinating, and the demonstration of our work on the qualification, because it doesn't help. We are all excited about our topical area, but we are not showing the world what we are doing so that it can be useful for them. It doesn't matter if it is in research and development or on what technology readiness level you are or what level of commercialization you are. Our purpose here is to share what we have available globally together. There is specific activities there. I'm not going necessarily to work through that now in this presentation, but you are welcome to reach out to us for further discussion. We do have also a specific technical task, and this is aimed at the feedstock powder. And we will get very soon into that activity there. But here again, it is about getting the information, collect what is there so that we all, each country, each researcher are not redeveloping the wheel and that we are working on it. I wanted to say, because we are focused really on the qualification efforts, our previous task one industry survey was on higher level. So now we want to drill down what is each country or each company are doing for qualification efforts so that we can do lessons learned here. Now it comes to the big question, the willingness to share information. And what was seen here from the bottom on this graph. And please note that this survey is still open. So this is the information that we currently have. And then you can see there that they are willing to share engineering application development. However, there is some caveat. So, and as you can see there. However, the excited thing is that the respondents are willing to share some information. 80% were willing to share, 20% were not willing. And by the way, there is the link through to our survey if some of our industry partners on this call, on this webinar, is willing to share with us so that we can address your needs, because it is really for providing industry solutions and it is not only for our fun. Obviously, we are enjoying it as well. I have not included all the information that we have received here, but I think what is significant here that most companies are working on material and component manufacturing, and the testing techniques are used is the standard test. There are some accelerated testing done, but because of the risk and the time for development and the urgency, focus is on the standard test. That in itself then open up the need or the opportunity for the research and development community to focus on the accelerated testing methodology and to get it into the codes and standards. On the qualification approaches, predominantly just a little bit ahead of the model-based and statistical test method is still the equivalence-based, still equivalent to our more conventional manufacturing methods. That is not wrong. However, that shows the tendency that we are still not designing for the newer techniques. And hopefully in time, we will get to that point so that we can fully reach the benefit for that. As part of our obtaining and learning from other industries, part of task 2, we had this additive manufacturing industry perspective panel during the recent TMS, where we were across aerospace manufacturing as well as nuclear providers and developers. And all of them had similar, not concerns, but similar needs. And really, it doesn't matter, apologies, in which industry we are, we really can join hands and learn from other industries and then just do the specific, unique opportunities that nuclear brings us. And I am willing to share some more input of that. We haven't written our report. Task 3, modeling simulation approaches for the qualification. How can we use modeling and simulation to accelerate qualification or to validate at least or decrease the number of experiments? So really some understanding what open source software are there, how can we apply these to accelerate manufacturing qualification. The team really has done excellent. Currently, it's only an Excel-based database, and we are busy testing it internally in our working group. But as we grow in maturity, we are willing to make this available over covering a variety of manufacturing processes, and also the use filter, and then the availability, and then with the detailed references with that. One part of this work will be presented by our Canada member, Lucy and Ivan, at the coming June 5th or 3 to 5 at the US Nuclear Regulatory Headquarters in Rockwell. On this technical approaches for qualification and through life performance. So this will be our test case, and from there on we hope that we will do further benchmarks going forward. Now task 4 is now the experimental approaches, and obviously we want to understand from our survey what do we need to focus on and how do we link it with our modeling as self, and what data is already within our members available that we can further continue with that. So to overcome possible proprietary constraints, we have designed a potential expanded elbow geometry benchmark design, as it provides opportunity for pipe sections and different angles to be built, and as a case study there, focusing again on 316 variants, as that is identified as the material type for many material developers to be used. And we will look at powder DED, laser powder bed fusion, and possibly wire DED in lesser extent. Later on, we would like to expand it into nickel alloys as well. And yes, you would say it's really not the most fancy geometry. That is an advantage of additive manufacturing. However, this is one aspect that we think that most of the industry partners and developers will use some tubes and piping of sorts, and even in core as well as out core. And that's why this is quite challenging. It looks simple, but it's quite challenging to build as well in the different processes. Now, a lot of work has been done, but some highlights, and I have not even included all the countries' contributions here, but some of the builds were made already in geometry, and certain the benchmark study and sharing of information is now in process. You can see for each material type there at the bottom, we will develop a shared benchmark study. There is already some country report out on the geometries, how we have decided, and obviously there's some modeling done, very early stage modeling as well as characterization. Now coming to the overview, thank you very much to the Framatome team that developed this, and they request please that no reproduction or alteration is made to these slides, and we appreciate their contribution. Why I really like this, because this is a view to look at it in your decision making, because it's really difficult to understand what is the advantages when additive, when conventional. And it brings strong advantages for complex components and tend to extend its impact as a serial production technology from their perspective. Here you can see that it shows here that the additive manufacturing is on the higher scale for complexity, but also for nuclear now, also on the lower scale of quantity. If you want to move to the foundry processes, moving upwards, you can also do some complex part and maybe a larger quantity of parts in your lost or your investment castings. And then if you machine it from bulk material, obviously it is low quantities and a low complexity. You are limited there. And then we all are maybe more used to the powder, the compaction and powder sintering processes. You can do a lot of components, but you are also limited with your complexity. So therefore, also on the right-hand side, I provide a costing analysis. So additive manufacturing is not always the right answer. However, it can a potential how be for a replacement part where the supply chain is not anymore available for your conventional manufacturing method. And your cost is indirect by having not the part and your plant need to stand. So there's a variety of work there. Moving forward, here you can see from their perspective and industry's perspective that there is a various amount of additive manufacturing processes. And for each one of us now to decide what are we going to do, why do we need to do, we really need to understand the property relationship, property manufacturing relationship. With other words, what is your end product's requirement? And then by having the technology knowledge of these processes, what will work well for you. And this is what Framatome did for then, focusing here on, well, what is it, 2, 4, 6, 7 manufacturing processes. And I'm sure by now you have started to hear a lot of the same terminology. So for WAM, for example, is the wire arc additive, or otherwise similarly to wire DED, slightly different technologies, but fall in the same family. Then there is some also plasma arc transfer, which is a layering, similarly like cold spray, and then hot isostatic base here. Here you can see again the effect of geometry complexity versus the size here, with the hot isostatic, WAM and cold spray more listed in their evaluation for their actual needs. And also then here on the right hand side, you can see the enormous primary circuit elbow, and then also the need for multi-material assembly. And we have a few examples of that going forward. With this then, they have decided that their current interest is on the laser powder bed fusion for their specific needs currently. Okay, there's a little simulation there, so thank you very much. I'm sure some of you knows this already. And with that, then we are moving to the joining and welding technologies. I think I must work a little bit faster here, but again, if we look at the preliminary survey of task 2, it shows that laser welding, friction stir welding, and electron beam welding are of interest of the respondents up till now, and therefore we will give some information of these. Now, electron beam welding can really make very high integrity components and also extremely large components as well. And the EPRI together with IMRC really did a very good work on this section welding for, and they use the NuScale Power project, and it was a US DOE project managed by the AMMT program under that. So I forgot now the actual decrease in welding time when they switched from gas, the TIG welding through to electron beam welding, in addition to all the other technical aspects. But it is tremendous. It is from months to days. So it is extremely important to understand your size of your component and then your integrity and obviously your equipment available. On the left-hand side there, we can see there that the MIG welding needed 15 layers to have 150 millimeter thick. The TIG welding have 78 layers to do the 180 millimeter thick. And then the electron beam have only one pass necessary to do the 150 millimeter thick. And that information is also, I put here a lot of references so that you can follow up there. So the advantage of the electron beam process is that it is an autogeneous welding method. So you don't need welding wires, so you don't have all the problems with the difference in composition. And it does have reduced heat, therefore reduced distortion. So thick sections can be welded in the single pass. There is, however, still challenges with the deployment, as listed here by AMRAC. Charles Carpenter, also part of our IMME group. And that is how do you eliminate your preheating? If you have some slopes there on your circumferential welds, how do you do that? How do you do the repair? And then what is the non-destructive evaluation of the weld? And also, what is the surface preparation methods that you can do? Now, friction stir welding, it can also potentially be heterogeneous. Don't need any filler materials. The video is running there in the background there. And on the right-hand side, we can also understand and see the metallographic differences. Okay, yeah, there we go. It can be very much automated as well, for both lengthwise axial as well as circumferential. And this is actual work that has been done at the PNNL and many other places can do that as well. But the benefits really can be seen that there is no harm to the base metal, and it does have improved properties. Also, weld repairs can be done in a single pass. Fully automated, you can control it very much, and then you can have various ones. Okay, let me just move on here. Here is some detail to show that similarly, the friction stir weld of grade 91 really work well and has better results when you compare with the normal submerged arc welding there. Okay, let's focus here on the contributions from Purdue University, where they really have a very interesting research project, but with very nice applications future. And it is a combined project for showing hot isostatic press as a joining technology, as well as the cladding technologies or the effect of cold spray clad and then heap capsule diffusion bond. So a variety of joining technologies. It's quite a busy slide here. However, the biggest information here that we want to get here is that we do not need to limit ourselves on what joining techniques are there available, and we must think about how can we integrate a lot of manufacturing processes in itself. We also can do graded joining by heap, as they have used this case study with SA508, different material manufacturing types, but also then with different manufacturing types, as I mentioned there above. And here is some microstructural advantages on the step-by-step approach. However, as with many of the hot isostatic press, the powder and the deoxidization of the powder process are in addition to your heap parameters and your initial manufacturing processes is extremely important. And there is still a need to understand all to quantify that effect, etc. Laser additive manufacturing, I am giving here the one example again from work from Professor Lowe from Purdue University. And I know it's a very busy. I'm provided this year for you for later reading. If we can focus here on really the understanding the strong dependency on the laser parameters and your creep strength and your manufacturing. So for each material type, you would need to understand the effect of the laser work there. And then also find it here was that the DED 316H fall within the scatter bound of the creep stress Larsen Miller parameter as the stars and stars, different stars shows the DED, and then the powder bed fusion in this case falls slightly below that normal curve that was used for the rod. So with other words, we are very close to understand or on the road to understand what is happening, what is also then once you have welded the material, what is the effect on the corrosion resistance? How does that influence? Because it is not only the one parameter or the one property that we need to combine, but there is multiple properties that we need to do. Now, large-scale manufacturing, I've already talked about hot isostatic press, but we must not forget the other manufacturing techniques. And again, here it is also forging. I have not included this, but there is still a very large place for the conventional manufacturing methods. We are not replacing them at all, and we need to understand where we are going. But I want to highlight the electric field assisted sintering, because maybe not many of you know already of the large facilities that are available, because many of us just think of it on the laboratory scale. However, there is commercial scale available, and I will provide some information. I will also give you some more information about flick and stir additive or laser deposition processes here. So INL really has a very nice system, a large format 800-ton press that can provide us sample sizes from 8 to 24 diameter. And I urge you to read more on their website of their facilities. Now, obviously, this is also a sinter process that is more energy sufficient. So therefore, it is something for us to consider using in future. Then Oak Ridge National Laboratory has a variety of large-scale component manufacturing, doing excellent work on actually hybrid manufacturing, as you can see there from the left, where wire additive manufacturing, wire VED has been used and welded then conventionally to another additive manufacturer built here, and has excellent in situ monitoring system to help understand what is the effect of all the different parameter setting. And then another case study is the Impeller prototype that has been built with a robotic direct energy wire DED, and also with all the different sensors. Oh, there is actually a video, so it's quite amazing to see this in action. So this is really something for us for the future. And not only for the future, but it's something that we can use. And while the video is on, let me just take a sip of water. Okay, with this, let me move on. I know there is too many nice videos for us to look at, but now let us look again at a friction stir additive. So friction stir is a solid phase manufacturing process, and it can also be used for a bulk manufacturing. Here is an example of, actually this was a specific high entropy alloy of very high strength, which we have done for the first time using the techniques. But you can also see that the solid phase manufacturing processes is the application of high shear strain during metal synthesis of fabrication, and it really produces high performance microstructures, semi-finished projects or engineering assemblies without the bulk melting of the materials. And this is important because now we can potentially have a different manufacturing process for very difficult manufactured material before, or have problems during segregation or the casting or the melting profile. Now, generally, the additive solid phase manufacturing is focused on 3 solid phase deposition technologies, which is the friction surfacing. You will see quite a number of terminology in the literature, and we try to simplify it here. And then there is melt. That does have the tool shoulder, which is more effective with your layering, depositioning, amongst other, but otherwise fairly similar to the friction surfacing. And then you have friction stir plate stacking. If you are in the field or have a plate supply available, you can build your bulk material up and still then have quite interesting features, of which those examples are giving over there. Okay, let me move on. Here is early research on high entropy alloys. With high entropy alloys, if you may know, many of the applications and the put into the market is limited because of not really a bulk manufacturing method, and we have started to do research on using this friction stir layer depositioning microstructures of these alloys, because of, in addition to the microstructural advances of the significant grain refinement of that, it is also possibility to make a bulk material of the HEA, which we hope then will bring it closer to demonstration and application. Here is the two material types that we have utilized. Both alloys are alloys that has been in other literature indicated as potential to be used in the nuclear energy. Excellent work here from Dr. Agrawal from UNT, North Texas University, showing, and why I show this here is that although we have done and discussed a lot of manufacturing technologies, not all the knowledge are there already on their radiation tolerance behavior. However, the layer depositioning here, as her schematic show here, that it does reduce the radiation hardening, and she has done already some with NSUF funded for rapid turnaround experiment, built some printed material to show that really we should look at the variety of irradiation levels, so the displacement per atom as indicated here with this graph, where it shows that for all our reactor types, or most of the reactor types that is listed here, all our requirements are not the same. So therefore, there is not necessarily one recipe for all. And why would you use a more expensive material that does have the higher resistance, but currently the experimental domain is within this green block here, where we have no voids with a solid state route, and then that blue box here, the void swelling domain in various stainless steels via a conventional route. So therefore, there is still a large need to work. If we look at her preliminary results here, and there is some literature available to read more detail after this event, it shows you that the void swelling for the friction stir layer depositioning really falls at the high dose at the absolute lower level versus if it was conventionally manufactured, which is already a wonderful increase and opportunity for us to explore further. Here is some other reference as well for some other advanced manufacturing processes as well as conventional manufacturing processes. And we are looking forward to more irradiation results going forward for that. It's a big need. I have not put in an additional slide on the HEA work that has been done, but there is also some journal articles that can explain that very similarly because of the refined grainery. Now I must speed up here, but I really would like to introduce some of you that may not know about the shape technology of PLNL for nuclear applications, for field cladding, heat exchanger tubing, and then also I want to highlight here on the tubing, the ODS tubing. ODS material really is a fantastic material, but yet again, it has not been pushed into commercialization yet for a variety of reasons. And today here, I will just show some spot check here on some of the technologies that is currently in process, that has potential and is looking for the next step of development for commercialization. really one of these or more of these can be more economic, viable and repeatable so that it can be qualified. I am not discussing the additive version of the work that I know specifically the AMMT program are doing, and that we will leave for a different time. It is too much. Okay, so then the shape is, as I mentioned, developed at PNNL, and it is a solid phase manufacturing process, shear assisted processing and extrusion process. There is a little video going on to rotating die is pushed into the billet material and then resulting in the fabrication of extradite between the mandrel and the orifice or the landing. Now, there is a variety of the designs, a variety of the material, and in all the tooling design, there is a big material component as well. This allows, it's really an opportunity for a variety of profiles. Here you can see it's not only round tubing, but a variety of square, asymmetric, multi-cell. Obviously, all material types has not reached the same TRL technology readiness level, but we are working on the higher strength, higher temperature materials now as we go along. It was initially developed for the automotive industry, and we are very glad that we can transition into the higher strength materials and temperature materials as well. You can see here, you can do wire, rod, and bar, which will also provide then the opportunity. Of all the research, really, I wanted to highlight this here because it's relevant to the nuclear energy with zircaloy tubing. It was LDRD, but it also shows here the possibility that you can both have a clad simultaneously inside or outside or both for this, and then have a very good equal thickness. And we have done more work now on ODS materials for direct tubing. I have not included here, but soon our paper is in the final stages of review comments addressing, so that information will be available soon. However, here again, you can see the difference in the grain sizes from before and after, very much a grain refinement here, and provide then a very good opportunity. We are currently busy with other HEA alloy for fuel cladding, very exciting work. Now, why do we look at other manufacturing methods and for ODS specific? And that is because there is such a lengthy conventional manufacturing process. It is working, but we really want to be more cost effective. And there is a high, not only cost, but a high, we can, there is so many parameters that we need to monitor to be able to go through this process that we really want to explore some more commercial processes. Now, some of the shape processes can eliminate until here and still do pulvering when you have the bar and then the pulvering, or if you can do directly from powder into your tube manufacturing process, as I showed in the previous slide. So very exciting as well is this patented process from University of Wisconsin-Madison, where they have again, eliminate multiple extrusion steps, make use of cold spray, where they have used a sacrificial or a removal substrate, and then you have do a thermal treatment of the freestanding monolithic ODS cladding. This is exciting work. It started from a university program funded by the Office of Nuclear Energy, and it is very excited. Obviously, there's a lot of science and engineering regarding, and I did not show here everything. However, it's very nicely written down in some of the references. But because you need your deformation on the surface, you need to have engineered very nice hardness for this specific alloy and material. And therefore, hardness reduction of the powder was necessary, and that is the research around that. Here is the end result of a few years of research, and it provided a near net shape freestanding ODS steel with the right manostructure, manufactured by Cold Spray for having a total clad with very nice fine grain structure and fine nanoparticles. So I will still come to the Cold Spray. So Cold Spray is not only a layer technology, but here it's used uniquely for a new manufacturing process. Here is some one example of the work at PNNL on the GARS. Actually, there is now newer work where the bar was then filtered as well as directly from powder to a tube up to, well, I think 4 inches or thereabout. Obviously, it's a long way to go, but it is already, the filtering process is already up to 12 feet. So also as a cost saving and opportunity. So we really hope that at least for tubing and ODS, we can get soon a process. Here is a very excellent microstructure of Cold Spray processing. And the black there is not cracks, it is just very fine grains. As I said, Cold Spray can be used for the full life cycle. Here is some simulations of the particle deformation. And because it is on the surface, again, it's not a melting process. It's also a solid phase manufacturing process, and no heat affected zone and no tensile residual stresses if you develop it correctly. It can also be why it's so used for repair is because it can be easily taken to the field. Here is, however, an example of we must not ignore the other areas. We can use it for rapid screening of alloys. We can do new designs to include it as a designed environmental or corrosion barrier. It improved the economics. And then generally up till now, more known is to improve the performance and economics or the life extension or the in situ repair. But it can also be used for some of the new sensor applications for life monitoring, so the life extension of that. Here on the right-hand side is examples of typical problems. It is in the light water reactor, but we as a Generation 4 reactor community really must look at this in relation to our own designs, and then already prevent similar defects to take place. Here is one example of the before and after, where Cold Spray was used in the light water reactor in the community together with various industry partners, which we are very happy to. And then Westinghouse also use chromium using Cold Spray for their optimized Zolo design. And it has been irradiated now here. Then new techniques or applications. So sometimes, working back from what is your requirement, What do you need? You may not find the ideal manufacturing process, and therefore you need to integrate or use little bits from manufacturing process. So I urge all of us, let us be more creative in what is over there. However, we do not need to redevelop the wheel in most cases. In most cases, it is understanding what is available and what can we do. One of such process is the iterative cold spray and friction stir processing. Again, here for iron ODS plates, there is really opportunity for us to produce some plates, a very fast general approach with extreme nice nano oxide precipitation as well there, and then also increase the properties as well. I don't have the reference here, but I believe literature will be coming out soon if it is not already out. We have done, as well as part of the AMMT program, work with powder sizes that we had available. So it's really early research. So conventionally, it is not the ideal grain size distribution that we need to use for cold spray. However, after that, we have then processed the region with the friction stir processing and still then achieve the very nice finer grains, as you can see from the left to the right. Now, obviously, this is early research, and we need to do some further work on this, but this provides another opportunity for us not to be so sensitive towards the supply of the powder because there is other opportunities for that. Now, a little bit more exciting for those of you that is working in field. Adrian Wagner from INL provided this information. I'm very excited about it. Obviously, if we look at, the sintering and the eFast processes and other diffusion bonding processes that is taken place, you can still do your gradients and your different materials and continue. There's still a lot of room for improvement and controls there or initiative there. However, if you really look here at the INL LDRD, where they have used a novel fill and cladding forms that can really be done with your additive manufacturing processes. Actually, very exciting to have this cladding lattice, not only for metallic, but also for your fill material. Very exciting work. Oh, okay, sorry, let me quickly go here. Okay, now a topic that is very important for us, and I think more of us need to start to think about it for future material development, but also for our current manufacturing processes, and that is our scarcity of our elements and our alloying elements in common normal alloys that we are all currently are using. So the PNNL team looked at for the IMMT program on all the 50 minerals that is critical for nuclear energy. And this table here really shows in the green a very quick one. Which of the elements that is on the critical minerals is available or is used in some of the alloys for all our reactor types. And obviously you can see here the message is that all our elements are being used here. Now, I have not included it in here in this presentation, but cobalt and nickel, especially cobalt, is one of those most critical alloys. And therefore, we as a team look with a glasses of advanced manufacturing on what is the impact. How can we ensure or decrease the use of that material? And we have divided it basically in two categories. I'm sure there's more, but for this study, we have done two. Replacement material. So how can we replace that alloy? So your design of your material. And we have focused on that by using 3 manufacturing processes. And then your waste material, or not, I should have said, so therefore using advanced manufacturing processes from the beginning decreases your waste. Or then if you do have your waste, how can you recycle it so that you can reuse it again, and not that it is not totally waste. It makes anyway your economy, scale of economy better. Here was then one way how we have used friction stir consolidation, means to save the minerals. And it is really what we show here. You can have a circular process. Here is the conventional way. You put the offcuts back to your casting process, or you can continue and then you can either consolidate it for that same alloy, which we have done with a 709 iron base as well as a nickel base. And then, or you can then do alloying during the consolidation process to make a billet or a tube or a bar or wire, and then you can continue doing other manufacturing processes. So this was really some of the first, if not the first, high strength materials that we have friction stir consolidated. It has been done in alloy, alumina alloys, but we are very proud to say that we have done it already here, and a big opportunity. Now, another, still on the rare earth, still on the scarcity of the material. There's even in the early stages, and as UTEP mentioned it, or to more, so the direct digital metal fabrication, where they have now a new undergrad program in mining engineering, so to help to be more efficient with this rare earth and the manufacturing processes. Now, they've got this blue laser DMG, and I forgot now what that stands for. But this is to be able to do multi-material Inconel copper steel high resolution printing, as shows there, especially with a high conductivity, high thermal conductivity and electrical conductivity, which does have also a potential role to play, not necessarily in core, but somewhere in your reactor plant as well. And then obviously they are also talking about the wire metal 3D and the high production input there. Then something that we might not have thought about, but it's the digital casting, 3D printed smart sand cast molds. Well, that is how you can, where you want to need to use castings, you can use traditional casting with automation, and it is in collaboration with another university there, where you printed your sand mold with your sensors in, and therefore you can develop your process parameters in the end to produce then your complex casting ready for work. And UTEP is really good in that work. Again, not in core, but on the wider perimeter, there is a lot of opportunity for lattice printing and a variety of applications that we can use for strength. In this case, they are using the examples on their batteries and the energy storage, which is slightly off the topic of our direct nuclear energy, but it provides the possibility for a variety of lattice structures. Obviously, there's various techniques that you can do this architecture, and it is not only additive manufacturing, but also some of your fused filament processes, etc. However, interesting, with other words, don't limit yourself in because you do not have the equipment. There is multiple collaborations that can take place. And also, we are getting opportunities to celebrate some good work. Here is the International Network on Innovation to Support Operating Nuclear Power Plants. Again, it is not a Generation 4, but it is an example of how and where we are already using advanced manufacturing that had a tremendous impact on the operating of the plant. And Vivek Agarwal from INL received the award then on behalf of the INL. And then the customized adjustable brackets were developed to support the valve position indicator sensor. And the brackets are printed using additive techniques and can be either bolted to the valve themselves or to the valve support structure without requiring any major change to the valve itself and without impacting valve integrity. Now, there is a YouTube video that will talk more about how this intelligent plant configuration management play a role in a lot of readiness and preventing a lot of downtime on the plant. So congratulations. And there's many other examples as well, and we can take lessons learned from this for our systems here. Non-destructive examination, really, I'm not have enough time to talk about it, but as you can see, our preliminary survey also shows here that the use of NDE are very important. And specifically, they are more interested at this moment in the post-build characterization. Very good work is done during the in-situ monitoring, etc. Now, what does post-build characterization mean? We will try to talk a little bit about it, but maybe another time. So life cycle NDE, really, you need to develop and understand your non-destructive examination techniques, how it can help you to accelerate development. But not only that, in the end then, to help during your in-service and during your decommissioning stage here. And here, I think I've got one or two slides here. There are still challenges for additive manufactured components specifically, but so forth also for other advanced manufacturing components. And that is the role of the surface roughness. It is also the size of the sample. If you can see there on right, currently, these techniques are more suitable for laboratory applications, but we hope in future that we can do larger and more in situ of these and more remote measuring systems here. Therefore, during your design process, you need to understand what is your inspection regions. Is it the weld or versus the entire part? Is it volumetric or is surface? Then are you looking for defect structures? What is the critical flaw? Very similar to your other techniques. However, because your additive manufacturing techniques and microstructures are still fairly unknown and its behavior in operation are not always available or known or understood, this is why this should be developed together with that there. Now, yeah, and then the lack of experience with these new in-service defect formation. So this next slide, I want to show that we can also indirectly leverage the relationship between unique ultrasonic properties of the material and the physical characteristics. So therefore, potentially, we can see how the ideally how in the service the property change over time if if we developed it like that. And here is some examples of what we have done as part of mainly of the AMMT program, where we compare measurements with actual conventional tensile stresses of grade 92 DED and 316 DED and laser powder bed as well. And I urge you to read there a little bit more. Oh, okay. My apologies. I need to jump back. In 2 weeks' time, there is this non-destructive evaluation of advanced manufacturing components at PNNL. And although it's a little bit late to register, you are still relevant to that. Okay, and I know I'm taking quite a lot of time, but I'm getting so excited. Now, we all can dream about the demonstration and deployment, but if we don't have a supply chain, we can't do this. So again, similar to the NRCs or the regulatory instances, the developers and the supply chain needs to work together for the full life cycle. Now, EPRI has held at the moment 3 supply chain workshops, each one with a different objective. The one about a week ago, and then the 4th one planned for September, which will be co-located with our AMMT programs program. There is 2 reports already available that you can look at the opportunity. However, I would like to show here from the first work here. And what all is obviously extremely relevant. You can see the high temperature material availability and new material qualification process take too long for us to really make an impact. But we cannot keep on saying that. We really need to do that now. And then, but what really caught my eye here was the design for manufacturability. Let us start to design for this advanced manufacture techniques, because then it is not counterfeiting, it is a proactive design, and do work on that, which will help the commercialization of advanced manufacturing. And we can only do that if we really collaborate, because we are all not individually enough to make a big dent, but together, if we put it all together, then each one of us can have a major contribution. I do not have time really to go through all this ASME code work that is going on, but there is work currently on laser powder bed fusion of 316H, which is the DOE AMMT programs executing testing campaign for high temperature 316H laser powder bed fusion. And there is some reference there, and then there's also DED and powder metallurgy there. It is quite involved, and obviously it is all the stakeholders need to go, needs to go together. Here is some work that every Mark Albert prepared for us. Thank you, Mark. And showing where we stand with the PMHIP, DED, and powder bed fusion, and some of the guidelines and some of the specifications. This is an excellent slide to keep for you as well, to understand where are you with your codes. Now, last but not least, I want to explain or provide some information about the US program. And I do know that there is many international programs as well globally, but this is my home program, and I would like to share it. I want to highlight as well that there is a website there which describe more the program. Also, it contains links to all our reports that has been produced and roadmaps going forward. Here is our contact team under the leadership of Maima Lee, our National Technical Director, and Dirk Skans Gillimore, our Federal Program Manager. But really, it is to accelerate the development, qualification, demonstration, and deployment of advanced materials and manufacturing in support of the US leadership in a broad range of nuclear energy applications. So you can see that we all globally have the same mission and vision and goals, actually. And if I can just jump here on one of the last goals here, last but not least, accelerate commercialization through technology maturation. Now, it cost a village to build a reactor and to commercialize it, and we each can contribute. So we have 4 technical areas: advanced materials and manufacturing, rapid qualification, environmental effects, and then technology maturation. As you can see, that we will then provide the nuclear industry with the next generation high performance materials and advanced manufacturing methods for expanded supply chains and demonstrate new technologies within the next decade. What I did not show here, which is absolutely without saying, is that each one of these technical areas are interlinked with each and every other one, as with our industry partners and stakeholders. Now, you can imagine that we can't do all the materials at one time. However, this is our vision, that we are on looking at the iron nickel-based refractories alloys, ODS, as well as for the reasons I indicated earlier, high entropy alloys for the next generation, because it does have a high potential, but it is not mature and not bulk manufactured yet. And then the cladding and the functional graded materials as well there. However, there is we must understand that we are not doing it, developing a material separately from the manufacturing process, and therefore needs to understand the integrated materials and manufacturing development. These are the classes of manufacturing processes that our program wants to focus on. However, you can imagine that under coating technologies, under the forming processes, under the welding, and then hybrid manufacturing is an enormous amount of work. Now with the current, I'm jumping a gun here. I should have had the ASME slide after this one. But currently there's only, 6 materials that has been approved for elevated temperature nuclear construction, and also not necessarily for the advanced manufactured processes, which derive it then to be a new material itself. So time is it is really timeously to do this work on the material manufacturing domain, and then qualification also include the irradiation effects and corrosion effects. But as the ASME code does not provide methods for those two, however, the NRC issued a material compatibility for non-light water reactor draft interim staff guidance, and I urge you to have a look at that document over there. So why do we focus on, for the current immediate, on the additive manufacturing processes? It is because it is a spatially heterogeneous microstructure, and it also, it is unlike traditional manufacturing. It creates geometric forms simultaneously with the material. So it's a highly localized process, and therefore we may have spatial variations. And do we understand how that spatial variations have an impact on the bulk properties of the material itself? And therefore, we have focused on this, and we are following a science-based engineering approach and combining scientific understanding with the engineering data. Important to develop our process structure property performance based qualification work. And we are demonstrating, we are using integrated experimental modeling and data-driven tools by using in situ process monitoring and digital data in the qualification process. And we are demonstrating this accelerated qualification methods through qualifying of laser powder bed fusion 316H stainless steel, as this is one of the materials that most of our industry partners indicate their first of a kind material will need to be in. Here is an example, very excellent work of our Oak Ridge team on the multidimensional data correlation platform, showing how each parameter is linked into a final digital twin, which will then accelerate development. So our aim is in 3 years, we will demonstrate, hopefully in 5 years, or aiming, not hopefully, digital aided qualification, and in 10 years we would have a AI-based design controlled very much there. It's included in our roadmaps as well. And then there is performance evaluations currently planned for neutron irradiation, both in the HIFER at Oak Ridge and ATR at INL, where we focus on the 316H rod as well as AM 709 and 316L, as well as then in other programs or NSUF funded work, there's also smaller projects going on, and obviously other programs as well. In the ATR, we are targeting the cycle now coming soon, and then we are in the planning for alloy 709 that we will develop that plan, or the plan is already developed. Corrosion effects, obviously you can understand with a variety of developers there that we must test the material under various conditions, and our sister program in the light water reactor, the additive manufactured materials are being tested under a different program, but we are have lessons there that we can learn. Technology maturation. So the goal is really to advance our technology by increasing the TRL level so that it can be adopted. So how do we do it? To summarize, it's really to do component fabrication and to demonstrate the fabrication feasibility of the reactor component using new material or technologies, and then to evaluate the component in relevant reactor environments or simulated reactor environments. Codes and standards, how do we accelerate this new material and manufacturing within the ASME code? And then how do we get regulatory acceptance and licensing and to monitor the work there? So final remarks, we must work on providing industry solutions. There is no recipe for all. So know your customer, know your end purpose. Why do you want to do that? What requirements should it be? And know your processes. Each of us are contributing a puzzle piece in this bigger puzzle. So let us work together for full integration and to gain momentum to accelerate the deployments. And how do we do it? By collaboration and sharing of data. We need to know what qualification technologies and the acceleration processes are there as well. And there is some key technologies that we immediately can focus on that will have an enormous effect on a multiple reactor types, according to my view, and that is the dissimilar joining. Our industry partners told us that for the past 6 years, let us do that. Cladding and coatings for the extreme environments, and then for future, is the alloy that we currently have the real one, or are we limit ourselves with our knowledge of the conventional manufacturing processes? And let us think a little bit further on that. And with that, I say thank you very much, Patricia. I know I have been extremely long. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this information that is for this presentation that is packed with an impressive amount of information, and that illustrates how deep we can go during GIF webinars. Quick announcement, just please join us for the upcoming 3 webinars. You can already register to them. The first one will be held on the 14th of May. It will be a joint IAEA GIF webinar. We hold those once a year, and the topic will be on advanced nuclear technologies for maritime applications. On the 12th of June, we will have a webinar on modeling UO2 fission gas release in Bison. And on the end of July, 30th of July, we will have a presentation on thermal hydraulics of supercritical water reactors. So please, the information has been or will be shared on the LinkedIn account of GIF and on the public website, and you can already register. So please join us for the upcoming webinars, and of course spread the word about them, so we reach as many interested people as possible. Thank you, and with that, I give the floor to Patricia to moderate the Q&A session.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Isabella. I see that it was a very, very comprehensive presentation with a lot of information, and it's very good because your slides really will serve a lot of people. So thank you for all the efforts you put together to prepare this GIF webinar. I just have one question for you, Isabella. Thank you for the insightful lecture. What is the nuclear engineer's views about additive friction stir deposition?
I don't know 100% how to answer that, but if I can preempt there, I think it is one of the untapped processes currently, because it is not as widely known and recognized. But as we are moving into now the more bulk manufacturing and the larger full-scale manufacturing, this will become more and more prominent. I think the role that we as a community needs to do is to make the information outside externally available on the properties and the advantages. So it is a push and a knowledge base that we need to present out to our developers. That is especially on the irradiation behavior and the corrosion behavior, so the full package. We know that there still needs to do a lot of optimization, but there is a lot of opportunities that we must make known. So it's part of disseminating of new information. Patricia, thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. I do not see any other questions. You know that you have access to the email of Isabella, so do not hesitate to contact her directly. I would like to thank very much everyone who is here. Thank you for the impressive lecture. My question is, are there any opportunities like a scholarship for future students provided by AMMT?
I think it will be best if you reach out to me directly. Currently, per se, we are welcome through the 5 national laboratories that is working on the AMMT program. So there is internal at the laboratories opportunities that is then linked to the AMMT program. As a program itself, we are not issuing necessarily studentships. However, also as part of the Department of Energy, Nuclear Energy university programs, we are working very narrowly with the assignment or the decision-making process of those. And obviously then we are working with the professors and the students as well. And often some of the students are then doing some internships at the different laboratories.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
I would like to add something, Isabella,
Thank
if you allow me. You have also through the NEUP, the CINR, go onto the website. There is a once a year scholarship fellowship from the Nuclear Energy University program for students. So I really encourage you to look at that. And you have also from the Office of Science, the SULI program. It's SULI
Oh, yes.
for undergrad students who can apply to, and they have a choice of national labs, and the national lab will pick them up. It's all fully funded. It's a 10 weeks scholarship to work in a national lab on the subject that is of your interest. I have another, how can early researcher with manufacturing related PhD work get more involved? Again, look at the SULI program, look at NEUP, CINR. Isabella, you have her email address. She's happy also to answer to you. With that, it's almost 7:15 on my time. I would like to thank everyone. Thank you again, Isabella, for a very comprehensive webinar presentation. Thank you, Alexeyev, for all the support. I wish you all a good day, a good night, and we see you with the joint GIF IAEA webinar next month, which will be hosted by the IAEA. Thank you very much, everyone. Wish you a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you again,
Bye-bye.
Isabel.
A
Bye-bye.
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Bye-bye.